All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. It's 10:04. So everybody, I just want to introduce you guys if you haven't met Erica already, but she's Erica Maclean from Maclean from All Set Escrow. She's going to go over all you the must knows in escrow and do just review important escrow tips and info that so you guys can just best serve your clients while they're under contract. So I'm going to mute some of you guys if you're not muted already, and then Erica, take it away.
All right, wonderful. Good morning, everybody. I think I've met everybody in person except for Kara. Nice to meet you, hun, and hopefully I'll meet you in person one day. So I am All Set Escrow. I am the branch manager and I kind of run the ship over there. Been doing this since 98, but I also sold real estate myself for 10 years. So good morning, Jody. And so I just want to bring some kind of tips of things that we've seen recently that's been going on a lot in the escrow world, other than some crazy markets and cancellations and going back into escrow and all this other stuff, and insurance issues. As most of you know, we are facing a lot of insurance issues on people getting homeowners insurance for their properties prior to close of escrow. We're seeing a lot of the California Fair Plan policies come into play. And so just when you get a buyer into escrow, I would start that conversation with them immediately on, hey, let's start finding somebody that does insurance and get those quotes going and make sure no issues with insuring the property. Good morning, Felisa. And so that's a big hot ticket item right now, especially when there's a loan involved, is the insurance. So working with buyers, talk to them immediately about getting an insurance policy in place and making sure the home is insurable. As you guys know, Farmers and Allstate have pulled out of California. They can broker insurance policies out, but we're going to see more of this, I think, in the upcoming months, unfortunately. So that's a big thing. One fun thing I want to tell you guys about is save the date. And if you love chili or love making chili, we are hosting our first annual chili cook-off Wednesday, November 8th. All the details to follow, but I got to tell you guys, I have some amazing sponsors with all the vendors that I work with. And one of the big prizes by Elite Lending Team, which is also part of PGS, will be donating a 65-inch flat screen smart TV for the grand prize winner. So we expect a huge turnout for this. Details to follow as to where we're going to have it. It'll either be at our new location where we're moving to, or it's going to be at a venue that I've been talking to for a little bit, just got to firm things up. So mark your calendars. It's going to be a fun event. And we'll hopefully see you there. I wanted to go over, so I put together a little outline of what we're going to discuss today. So can everybody see this screen that I'm sharing?
No.
No.
Okay, let's try this again. Hold on.
I have a question, Erica, before we get started. How long is it taking on the California Fair Plan to get like approval?
I've seen, honestly, a minimum of 7 to 10 days that it's taking to get everything approved, because they do some stringent research and investigating of the property before they'll insure it. So, and a lot of times with the California Fair Plan, that policy sometimes has to be paid up front. It cannot be paid at the close of escrow too. So prepare your buyers for that as well.
Good to know. Thank you. Yeah, we're
Sure.
in the middle of it and they had to take pictures and everything just to send to them.
Yeah, I'm seeing even regular insurance companies, Jody, honestly, having to do that as well. I have a file under contract right now where they're having a major issue with insurance. This home was built in the 1930s. It's up in LA County area, but they went through 4 different insurance companies, got declined, and then Farmers is holding on by a thread, but they're wanting all these pictures of the exterior of the home and everything. So insurance is becoming quite the hot topic for sure.
It's a nightmare right now. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, can you guys see the screen now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this is just a quick outline of what we're going to go through today. If you guys have any questions after each topic, let me know. I'll be happy to clarify. First big thing is approved notaries. So a few years back, we were not so concerned with this, but lately there's been a lot of notary fraud going on, especially when it comes to cash transactions or vacant land. So just know that All Set Escrow, we will only use fully approved, bonded, licensed, knowledgeable on escrow documents, approved notaries. So when you're dealing with a seller or a buyer, we have the ability to arrange nationwide notary services anywhere that they need, to have our approved notaries go to them, but we can no longer send clients documents for them to go select a notary, have documents notarized and send back to us. It just doesn't happen anymore. There's just too much fraud. There's an escrow company that almost sustained a $400,000 loss on a vacant lot deal where the seller was a fraud, had a fraudulent notary that worked with them, everything. I mean, it escalated all the way to the sheriff's department and everything. So we will no longer allow outside notaries to do any notary service for us. Any questions on that, you guys? Okay. Paying bills through escrow. This is more for on the seller side of things. Just know, you guys, when we, the seller did a repair or whatever, and they want to pay this through escrow, we don't have a problem paying bills through escrow. Where it becomes a little bit tricky is when you say, hey, escrow, this work's going to be completed after the close of escrow. Can you hold X amount of dollars in escrow for us and pay the bill once we receive it? Challenge with that is, one, yes, we can. We do not like to hold it longer than 2 weeks. But two, in order for me to release any money through escrow, buyer and seller both have to sign an addendum authorizing the release of those funds to the appropriate vendor. So just keep that in mind. It's not the ideal situation to hold money in escrow ever, but if we have to, anytime I release it, I need a signed addendum by both parties, regardless of what that money's for, whether it's a deposit being held or paying a roofer to do some roof work, things like that. And also keep in mind, whenever there's a new loan involved, the lender always sees the master combined estimated closing statement. And if they see too many like repair bills being paid by the seller, it could trigger a red flag for them as to why are so many repair bills being paid? What's wrong with the property? Should we be alert to something? So keep that in mind when asking escrow to pay bills through escrow. Anybody have questions on that? Okay, perfect. Item number 3, the credits through escrow. So as you know, if there's a new loan that the buyer is getting, any credit that is negotiated between seller and buyer after the initial purchase contract is completed has to be approved by the buyer's lender. And right now, most of the credits are going towards buy downs because people are buying down these crazy rates. But just know that, if you have a 17-day contingency period, repair requests are being negotiated back and forth, and you guys ultimately decide, hey, you know what, buyer, we're going to give you a credit in lieu of any repairs. That credit, for one, cannot be referenced as a credit for repairs, and two, that credit has to be approved by the lender's underwriting department. So let's say you have $20,000 in repairs that needs to be done, and buyer agrees to take a credit in lieu of those. Well, come to find out, the buyer's closing costs don't equate to $20,000. You may have a problem with the buyer getting that complete credit. So make sure when you're talking about any type of credits, one, don't mention the word repairs when it comes to a lender. And two, have a conversation if you're representing the buyer and just with the lender and just say, hey, we're negotiating some credits through escrow. Possible credit is XYZ amount. Will the buyer be able to use the full amount? Because nothing is worse than getting to the close of escrow and finding out they were only able to use half of the credit because their loan guidelines requires a certain down payment, or they don't have enough in closing costs to cover the credit. Any questions on that? Okay, if the transaction is all cash, we're not concerned with anybody approving anything. You can give $100,000 credit and it really doesn't matter. And this is the one instance where I can accept in escrow the repair request where it references a credit in lieu of repairs, because we don't have any lender that's trying to approve anything. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? All right, moving on to solar transfers. So as you know, a lot of properties in California are going to the solar panels. If it's recorded against the property, meaning there's a UCC financing statement or a solar contract recorded on the preliminary title report, that is the point that escrow gets involved. Okay, so we will assist with the transfer if that's what seller and buyer agreed to. Buyer will have to go through a credit check process, etc. So you want to get that process started right away. Now, there are solar loans that are done by a third party. You get your solar panels, let's say from Sunrun. However, the financing went through a third party credit union. In those cases, most of the time, the solar has to be paid off because they don't subordinate and they can't let the client assume the existing loan. So make sure you understand what kind of solar you're dealing with for sure on a property, and making sure that you're addressing that very early on in the listing stage would be good. And if the solar transfer is eligible, you want to make sure to let the seller know that they need to speak with the solar company, let them know that they're selling the property, provide them authorization to talk to escrow so that I can do my process once I get to that point. Because if the seller doesn't give them authorization, I can't do anything with the solar companies. In the case where you have a solar panel system that's put on, seller said it's completely paid off, there's nothing recorded against the property, there may be a warranty and things like that that still need to be transferred over to the new homeowner, but there's no solar contract or solar lease that needs to be transferred over, meaning nothing's recorded against the property. Therefore, escrow does nothing at that point. That is strictly between seller and buyer outside of escrow, where they just make sure any warranty or servicing of the solar panels, that's transferred outside of escrow. So the new buyer, if they have any issues, they can contact the solar company directly and get whatever service they need. Okay, any questions on solar? All right, moving on, HOA documents. So as you all know, this is a thorn in our side, and it always will be until there's some regulation over these management companies. But for now, as it stands, the standard turn time for homeowners association documents is about 7 to 10 days. So when you're either accepting an offer on behalf of your seller or writing an offer on behalf of the buyer, understand that when you shorten up the contingency periods, that does not matter if the buyer does not receive homeowners association documents within that contingency period time. Know that per the contract, the buyer has 5 days from receipt of those documents, or any disclosure for that matter, to review and remove the appropriate contingency. So if you are representing a seller, I highly recommend, if you are demanding that the buyer shorten up their contingency periods, you prepare your seller that there's probably going to be added expenses to order the homeowners association documents on a rush. If we don't order them on a rush, that will extend the buyer's contingency period from the time that they receive the documents and have time to review and approve them before they can remove that contingency. 99% of the documents that we ordered are done through a third-party entity, and they require payment upfront. So they don't even begin processing our request until the seller has paid those document fees upfront. When we open escrow, we order the HOA documents. We will send the seller an opening email with complete instructions on how to go in and pay with credit card or whatever instructions it may be. to pay for these documents. It is crucial that you talk with your seller and let them know that paying for those documents is of the utmost importance very quickly, if no later than 24 hours for them receiving our instructions, if not sooner. We do have the occasional HOAs that require still a cashier's check or money order, will not take a personal check or credit card. So we will provide the seller with a FedEx label for them to send in the payment directly to the management company to get those paid. The other thing that's been coming up a lot too, because we are seeing properties being sold that were purchased within the last, let's say 24 months or so, the seller will come back and say, hey, I got all those documents from when I bought the house. I'm just going to give you those. I don't want to pay the money. My conversation with any seller typically is, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here's the problem with that. If there's any documents that are out of date or not accurate as of 2 years ago, that have changed, modified, or anything else, you are then liable for any claim that comes back regarding the HOA. If the buyer finds out, wait, I thought I could have 2 dogs now. Well, a year ago, they amended it to only allow 1 dog there, or whatever the case may be. And the buyer technically can come after the seller for non-disclosure of the proper documents. So yes, these HOA fees can be steep, anywhere from $600 to $1,000 per HOA. The liability that the seller puts on the management company versus on themselves kind of is priceless. So I encourage sellers to just allow us to do the process and put that liability on the management company versus having it on themselves. And aside from that, we have to, per the contract, provide them with the 12 most recent months of meeting minutes and the most recent statement of account. So there still is certain documents that I will have to order through these HOAs. And keep in mind, these HOAs have smartened up and they realize that some people do this. So what they've done is they've bundled it into one package to where you basically order all or nothing. So kind of screws the seller, if you will, in that sense. But, for me, removing the liability off the seller and putting it on the management company and ensuring they provide the most up-to-date and accurate information, that is priceless. But I'm hoping one of these days we put together some kind of petition to go after these management companies, because the fees that they charge just to email documents is ludicrous. I mean, back in the day, they used to print out these huge package of 800 documents and they'd ship them to Escrow. Okay, it's a little bit more justified, but now they just click email. And 99% of the time, they're wrong. I have to go back to the management companies, I'd say more than half of the deals, and say, hey, you guys provided me 2 months worth of meeting minutes. We requested 12. Where's the balance of them? Or they'll provide me an old insurance deck page. It's just ridiculous. There's no accountability on their part whatsoever. But that is something that we do as an escrow company. We will audit the HOA package that's received. We can't ensure the accuracy of the information they provide. We can just make sure that they provide what they're supposed to provide as far as documents required. So I'm not sure if most escrow companies do that, but we do that. Okay, any questions on our lovely HOA documents? All right, moving on to the infamous 593 form.
Wait, there is one in the chat. What's the average cost for the seller to pay for HOA docs?
So it varies. Where's the chat? How come I can't see that? Maybe Gary can help me out with that. Let's see here. Oh.
At the very bottom, you don't see it?
Yeah, it's not. Okay, I see it. It's at the top of the screen here.
Oh yeah, because sharing your screen. Yeah.
Okay, so the average cost is anywhere from, I've seen them as low as about $500, and that's just for the document package. And I've seen them all the way up to about $1,000 per HOA. So if there's a master and a sub association, then what you're dealing with is 2 sets of HOA documents, even though 90% of the documents are exactly the same. then you're dealing with ordering 2 separate packages. So I did one for Amanda Olivas, and she had 2 associations in it, cost her client $2,000 up front. Now, this one did in fact include the transfer fee, which normally can be paid through escrow, but yes, we do have separate HOA document fees. And then on top of that ludicrous amount that they charge a transfer fee to type in, remove the seller's name, and then type in the new buyer's name in their system. So it can range anywhere from $500 to $2,000. So giving, when I do net sheets for you guys and stuff, the amount that I try to use, if there's one association, I'll put an estimate in there for documents and transfer fee of about $850, just so your seller doesn't face sticker shock when they see that email come over saying you got to pay this amount for the documents. Are we good there? Okay, perfect. Moving on to the 593 form. So for those of you that don't know what this form is, it's California state withholding document. We do not deal with the IRS on any level except if the seller is a foreign entity without an EIN or social security number. That's the only time that we deal with federal level on tax withholding, and that amounts 15% of the purchase price. So if you have a foreign entity, individual, I should say, selling a property, we need to get on that right away and get the proper tax documents to them to go to their tax person and start looking at those numbers ahead of time. I've only had 2 cases in the past 5 years that I've had to withhold on a federal level, and it's a big chunk of money when you're talking 50% of the sales price. However, through escrow, we deal with California state. As you know, they love our tax dollars. So when you're going to sell, if you are a seller and you're selling a property that you have not owned or considered your primary residence for a minimum of 2 years over the last 5 years, you may be subject to withholding. The standard withholding amount on a purchase transaction is 3 1/3% of the purchase price. And to some sellers that are looking to sell and then buy again, that's a hefty chunk. So again, I cannot reiterate the importance of getting a copy of this document, which I'm happy to email to everybody again, and bringing it to your listing presentation. Okay, because if at any point your seller says, this is a rental property, this is a second home, this, we haven't lived here for 2 years, or if you ask those questions and they can't answer yes to any of them, say, okay, Mr. Seller, Mrs. Seller, I highly recommend you take this document and start talking with your tax person now to see if you can claim a loss or a zero gain, or see if you qualify for any exemption that's on this document, because if you're not, you may be subject to California state withholding, which is approximately 3 1/3% of the purchase price. So if you look at part 3 of this document right here, the first question says the property qualifies as the seller or decedent if sold by the decedent's estate or trust, principal residence under the IRC section 121. They expect consumers to know all the IRC sections, which just blows my mind, because we don't, and I wouldn't know it unless I'm doing escrow. So what that rule is I've lived in the property for a minimum of 2 years over the last 5 years. That's what that IRC section talks about. Item number 2 talks about the seller or decedent, if sold by the decedent's estate or trust, last used the property as the seller's principal residence under IRC section 121 without regard to the 2-year time period. I'd say about 10 or 15 years ago, the Franchise Tax Board modified this document to add this additional option here. And I do believe that it was due to the fact that we are a heavily populated military state, and our military people cannot determine when they're going to get called to be relocated somewhere or something like that. So this may qualify them for an exemption. But again, if they have not lived in the property for 2 years over the last 5, I recommend they start talking to their tax person very early on so that they don't get hit when we prepare that seller's net sheet with a withholding amount, because I do get sellers that are very upset when they had no clue that withholding was needed, and they find out when we go to close escrow that they're getting that much money less than they anticipated. There is some other exemptions in there. I'll let you guys kind of browse over that document. Some cases, not too much lately with the equity that people have in most of their homes, but people maybe that have sold or purchased their home in the last couple of years, they bought it for at or about the same price as what they're going to be selling it for. So they may qualify for an exemption with this clause right here about the loss or zero gain. If they are going to try and do that, we do need to make sure that they, what's going on with the mouse here? Let me see if I can zoom this in a little bit. Page 2 is where they would complete the loss or gain information. They'd enter in all this information. Their tax person, again, can assist them with completing all that so that they can make sure they can, see if they qualify for a loss or zero gain. It's super important in escrow that we get this form completed all the way by the sellers, or we have to go back to them and say, hey, this is not completed all the way. We need to make sure that, it is completed all the way. Really quick, I want to go back to items 1 and 2, where it talks about decedent if sold by the estate or a trust. So if you're dealing with a seller that, let's just say, is a successor trustee of a trust, their parents had the property, they both passed away. Now one of the children is the successor trustee and they're selling the property on behalf of the trust. When the seller's completing this document and all escrow documents, pretty much, they need to act as a successor trustee of the trust. So when they're answering the questions, they need to say, okay, did the person that was the original trustee, did they live in the property for a minimum of 2 years over the last 5? And, can they qualify for the exemption? So we as escrow are not licensed CPAs or tax advisors of any sort, but I can give them examples of where an exemption may apply. But I always end that conversation with, but I do highly recommend you speak with a tax person, because I cannot give you tax advice. And this could have huge ramifications if it's not completed properly. Okay, everybody understand that one okay? All right. Any questions on that document? I know it's a little complicated, but again, please, you guys, take this with you at listing point. Have it part of the disclosures your sellers complete, so that there's no surprises last minute or anything like that. All right, everybody good with that? I don't see any questions in the chat, so moving on. All right, item number 7, we're going to talk about trusts or other entities selling the property. Seeing this a lot lately, and it's super important that the people that you have sign your listing agreement. So way before you even get into escrow, you verify that they're authorized to sell the property or sign on behalf of the entity. So what we deal with a lot in escrow is Joe Smith signed a property, as successor trustee, but lo and behold, he's just a beneficiary. He has no capacity to sell or do anything when it comes to selling the property. He just gets some of the monetary consideration from the proceeds after all's said and done. So if you have a successor trustee, or say anything like an LLC or any corporation or anything like that, ask your seller for the trust documents or the operating agreement for the corporation, and make sure you review it and make sure that they have the capacity to sign your documents. You're pretty much null and void if you have people that don't have authority to sign or purchase a property if they're not in that capacity per the documents. So I know Gary and I had a transaction a while back. He jumped all over it, got the trust documents. We reviewed it with title. We ensured the person that was signing is in fact the person that is supposed to sign. And once he got a buyer in play, it was smooth and easy. You don't want to get under contract with a buyer, have a 7-day close, and find out the seller that's been signing everything has no authority to sell a property. So that also goes on the buy side too. So we have a lot of investor purchases right now, believe it or not, even in this market. And, there'll be one guy that signs the purchase contract. I'll get the operating agreement, and nowhere in there does it say that this person has the authority to sign anything to purchase a property. So whether it's a trust or other entity selling the property, make sure you get the appropriate documents from that principal and verify who has the capacity to sign documents and act on behalf of that entity. I am more than happy to review the documents with you guys, and also ensure that. And then I always go back to title because they're the ultimate decider. Go to title and say, hey, I believe XYZ has the authority to sign on behalf of this entity. Can you just confirm that? It really only takes about 24 to 48 hours to clean all that up and make sure you have the right person signing. So get the documents up front, make sure that they have the capacity to sign, and be ready to go once you get an active buyer in play. Okay. All right. Any questions on that? Okay. Item number 8. We see this quite often too. So we have Joe Smith has agreed to buy the property at 123 Staple Street. Lo and behold, we find out that Joe Smith is legally married. Being that California is a community property state, we have to do one or two things. We either have to create an interspousal deed where the spouse would deed off their interest, or we add the person on to title. Now, I get a lot of emails from agents saying they're not going to be on the loan. They're only going to be on title. They don't need to sign anything. That is completely false. Anybody that is on the grant deed is a buyer. They don't have to be securing any interest in the loan, but if their name is on title and they are considered a buyer, they can come back and sue the seller for non-disclosure of not seeing disclosures. They have the same capacity as the person that's on the loan. So if you have a buyer that tells you, hey, so-and-so is going to purchase a property, their spouse is going to be on title, but they're not going to be on the loan, so we're writing the contract this way, avoid a lot of additional documents for your lovely TCs and just put that other person on the contract right out the gate, because they should technically be signing the contract, all disclosures, and they will be signing escrow documents. The only difference is they're not going to have to sign all the loan documents. They will have to sign a few, but they don't have to sign the complete loan document package. Whatever is on the grant deed that I prepare in escrow, showing who's on title, will also be how the deed of trust shows for the loan. Those two documents must match, or the county recorder will not record. So even if they're not signing the note, they're going to be on the deed of trust that also coincides and secures the loan on the property. Any questions on that? If you enter a situation where it wasn't disclosed that somebody's going to be on title, but not on the loan from the RPA point, CAR form AOAA needs to be completed, assigning a partial interest to this additional person as a buyer. So make sure you're aware of that going into it. If you're representing a buyer, anybody that's going to be on title should be signing the RPA, and we'll be signing all the escrow documents. Okay, any questions on that? All right, moving on to uninsured deeds. Seeing a lot of this right now. So what an uninsured deed means is that I wanted to put my uncle on title with me. I get my hands on a blank deed. I write it all in. I walk it into the county recorders and I get it recorded. Well, that was not insured by a title transaction. So that is what an uninsured deed is. So now I go and I decide to sell my property. And now I have my uncle on there. Well, he's got to sign an uninsured affidavit saying that he agreed to be on this deed, but now he's also a seller when I go to sell the property. So I have him fill out a statement of information And I send it down to title for clearance to ensure no liens or judgments. Title comes back and goes, your uncle owes $500,000 in back taxes, liens, judgments, everything else. Well, guess what? That's $500,000 less proceeds that I'm going to be getting out of the transaction because my uncle's on title with me. Okay, so uninsured deeds are okay. And most of the time we can clean them up pretty easily. But granting title over to somebody on a deed, or removing somebody from title that was originally on title and then going to sell the property, there's a lot that needs to be done to clean that up to ensure the title transaction side of it. Any questions on that? So I know you guys, when you take a listing, you do property profiles, but I also recommend, and you can shoot me the email or the address of the property, not only get a property profile, but let's get a full chain of title, because that is where we will find any uninsured deeds or any deeds that were done incorrect or any cleaning up of title that we're going to need to do ahead of the game. I have one file right now where it was deeded from 2 people to the 1 person. Then they added 2 other people to the deal, and they did all the deeds wrong. They all have spouses that never deeded off the properties. And we have one of those party who refuses to sign the cleanup deed that's necessary to close. So we are at a standstill on our ability to close escrow right now, because this uninsured deed person will not sign another deed. They're angry at the other parties now, and now they want money for it, where before they didn't want any money for it. So understanding what the chain of title is, more than just a property profile, is super, super important when selling a property. Okay, any questions? All right, perfect. We're going to move on to sample buyers and estimates. So I kind of put together, you guys, for you. We'll start out with the buyer estimate. These are the customary fees that buyer will typically pay on an escrow transaction where there's a loan involved. Okay, so like in this case, purchase price is $900,000, loan amount $600,000. Here you have your standard $595 fee that typically the buyer will pay. In some cases, the agent picks it up, but in case not, it's on here. These 4 charges here are the standard fees that you're going to see as far as lender charges go. There's numerous other ones such as discount points, buy down rates, underwriting fees, things like that. But these are the standard that you're pretty much going to see on most loan involved transactions on a buy side. The notary fee on here, that's the fee that is charged by the approved third-party notary service that we used if there's a mobile notary involved. That fee does drop down about $50 if the client chooses to come into the office. So, with these ever soaring gas prices, it's a lot for these mobile notaries to be driving all over San Diego, Riverside, and Orange counties. So they do charge $200 for this service. And aside from the 150 pages of loan documents that they have to help execute. These charges down here under escrow and title, I'm going to go through these really quick. For some reason, and I do apologize, I forgot to put in the escrow fee on here. Escrow fees and title fees are based off of the purchase price and loan amount. It's a formula, and I'll go over that with you for the escrow side of it here in a minute. But our escrow fee is based off of the purchase price. We do, here, let me just go back to this page really quick. Right down here, I did the breakdown for you in item number 11. Our charge for escrow fee is $2 per thousand plus a $450 base per side. So in this case, on a $900,000 purchase, I jumped over to the seller estimate. The escrow fee is $2,250 per side. Each party pays their own. Title policies, the owner's policy premium that the seller typically pays for is based off of the $900,000 purchase price. On the buy side, if there's a loan involved only, the buyer typically pays for the lender's title policy, and that's a formula based off the loan amount, not the purchase price. So in this case, you have a lender's title policy based off of $600,000. That loan policy would be $1,101. Okay. I pride ourselves a lot on non-junk fees. So when you're shopping around for escrow services and things like that, make sure when you say, what would your fee be on a $900,000 purchase, they'll come back and give you the base escrow fee. What they won't do is tell you all the miscellaneous fees. So after they tell you the base escrow fees, say, okay, if there's a loan involved, what other additional fees do you charge? And make sure you understand that, because 9 times out of 10, if you calculate all those fees, they're much, much higher than all set escrow charges. We are pretty good on our fees. We are standard in the industry, is pretty much kind of general throughout. I will be very honest and tell you that I can't compete with title-owned escrow companies because they make all their money off the title fees. So we are an independent escrow company. We don't make any money off the title side of things. The only way we make money is off the escrow fee. So if there's a loan involved, we do charge a $250 loan tie-in fee. Keep in mind, it's because we print about 400 pages of papers for the loan documents. So we provide the client with a complete copy of the documents, along with the package that they need to sign. So we're usually printing out close to 400 pages when you say all that's involved. The messenger fee, this is a title charge. This is what the title company charges us to order a courier service to pick up the documents, the recording documents from our office, and goes down to them. This fee is usually padded pretty high here. When we do the final closing statements, you usually see this figure about $20. The fee is split between buyer and seller. So if the fee comes back at $50, the seller gets charged $25 and the buyer gets charged $25. Sub-escrow fee, that is a fee that is charged by title, not escrow. I know a lot of people think it's an escrow fee, but it is not. The title company charges to handle loan documents on behalf of the buyer, as well as make any payoffs or pay taxes or anything like that on behalf of the seller. So that is a fee that's about $125 to $150, and again is split between buyer and seller. Wire fee, the title company may or may not charge the wire fee, depending if they have to wire out payoff funds or overnight any payoff things or taxes or things like that. Again, this is a padded amount on all estimates. Actual charges gets disclosed once we do our final breakdown. This lined item where it says wire courier overnight fee to all set escrow, it's charged on both sides. $60 each side is what our estimate is. If we have to overnight loan documents back to the lender, we charge a fee. If we wire sellers proceeds, we charge a fee because we get charged those fees by the third-party entities such as FedEx or our bank, etc. Endorsements is a title charge. If the lender on the loan has any specific endorsements that they want to include on the final title policy, various endorsements are a certain charge. Some of them are free. We pad about $75 in ours. That usually drops down to $25, which is what the title charges for a specific endorsement that most loans require. If there's no endorsements that cost anything, this fee gets completely removed. Recording fees down here. These are an estimate of what it costs to record the deed of trust for a new loan and the grant deed. Again, these fees are padded, and they're a little bit higher than they normally are. But we do this to ensure that when the buyer wires us money to close, we have plenty of funds to close. More than likely, the buyer is going to get a refund when we close and balance out all the final numbers. But we never want to have to call a buyer at the 12th hour and say, we don't have enough money to close. You need to wire us in another $1,000. So we do pad this. But again, more than likely, the buyer will get a refund once we go to close out the file and make any adjustments necessary. HOA dues, that's only applicable if there is a homeowners association. HOA dues can vary depending on the community, anywhere from $80 all the way up to $600-700 depending on the community. Homeowners insurance premium, that's an average of what some policies cost. However, given the nature of the insurance industry now, we are seeing these numbers soar quite a bit. So that amount is just an estimate of what we think it would be. I won't go over too much on the seller side of it. The only thing that's really different on this side of it is sellers paying commission. So that is whatever your listing agreement states. It will determine this breakdown here. And the only other thing is the owner's policy. With the title insurance, this fee right here is based off of the purchase price. Whereas on the buyer's side, it's based off the loan amount. If there's no loan, the buyer doesn't have any title policy that they're charged for unless otherwise negotiated in your contract. I get a lot of questions from sellers about what is this documentary transfer tax? It is on your RPA, and it typically is the seller paying for it. This again is another formula. It's $1.10 per thousand. Gary, did you have a question?
All right, yeah. It was actually about the buyer's estimated net sheet.
Oh, yeah.
Just a couple quick questions. Do you ever get agents asking you for this? I know it's real common for the seller when you're doing a listing, but I'm guessing people don't really ask for this, do they, from you? Like prior to even going into escrow, like, hey, we're going to buy a house for 900,000. Can we get a buyer's estimate?
So I do occasionally get that request, and I always have to tell the buyer's agent and or the buyer that, look, I can give you an idea of what your escrow and title fees will cost, but I have no clue what the lender's charges are. So that could, they can take that and combine it with a disclosure that the lender gets them to get an idea of what it would cost them to purchase a house. But everything is contingent on the loan amount, the terms of the loan, the interest rate that they're locked in, if they're buying down. I mean, I've seen buy downs anywhere from $5,000 to $25,000 right now. So that's a huge difference to a buyer. So to answer your question, occasionally I will get a request for a buyer side estimate. But again, it's simply just going to be escrow and title fees based on the loan amount and anticipated purchase price.
Got it. And one other one, which I think is going to be rare as well, as I know that it's very typical for escrow and title fees to be 50-50. Because the market is the way it is, are you seeing an increase of agents asking or having the buyers pay for both the seller side as well?
I've only seen it a couple times recently with the way the interest rates are and everything. I don't know if it's gotten as competitive enough to where the buyer's going to be picking up additional expenses because their loan charges have skyrocketed. So it's really difficult for a buyer to pick up the expense. The couple occasions where I have seen it is where you have an investor buyer, all cash or hard money, where they're just getting a smoking deal on the property and they want to absorb as much as they can on the seller side to ensure they get their offer accepted.
Okay, cool.
So I'm not seeing it so much where there's loans involved though on the buy side, because buyers are scraping their pennies together to even get into a house. I'm seeing more and more credits from sellers to buyers for buy downs or credit for closing costs or anything like that.
Okay.
And I'm seeing the other way.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thanks.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, back to the seller's estimate. This documentary transfer tax, again, you guys, this is a formula that the county recorder charges for the transfer of ownership. It is $1.10 per thousand, and you'll see it on the grant deed always once it's recorded. But this typically is a seller charge, and it's a formula $1.10 per thousand. And then, of course, you have your various payoffs. So if we're paying off any mortgages or whatever, that's where you'll see it. Remind your clients, I get a call a lot. Erica, my escrow is closing on October 14th. Should I make my mortgage payment? I, as escrow holder, will never, ever, ever tell a client not to make their mortgage payments, because then I take on the liability of any late fees or any dings to their credit or anything like that. What I do say is, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if you are going to make your payment, please do so right now, so I have time to allow the mortgage company to post your payment and order an updated payoff prior to us closing. Because I don't want to pay the mortgage company more than what they're owed. But if I can't get an updated payoff reflecting a mortgage payment that was recently made, I have to pay per the demand that I have. I can't go off of verbals or anything like that. I mean, granted, once the payoff is made, the mortgage company will balance out that person's mortgage account, including any impounds that are established, and they'll calculate whatever refunds due the client. And within about 4 to 8 weeks, the client should receive a refund of any funds that have been paid over or an existing impound account that they had reserves money in. Okay, everybody got that? And reminder, interest is paid in the arrears on mortgage. So when you go to make your September 1 payment, you're paying interest for the month of August, but principal for the month of September. So when we go to pay off a loan, and let's say we close today on it, the client made their September 1 payment that covered the period from August 1st to August 31st. But when we make the payoff, we will collect interest from September 1st through and including a couple days past our close of escrow date, because interest is always paid in the arrears. Are we good on that? Perfect. HOA transfer and document fee. This is what I was telling you about earlier. I put this on all my estimates when I do net sheets for you guys. It's roughly $850. That's give or take $100 to $500. I hate to say it. But this is a number that I'll use so that your sellers aren't completely shocked when they see that number. Home warranties on average, they range anywhere from $450 all the way up to $1,000, depending if it's a condo, single family with a pool, etc. So I always use $750 for a pad on that. And then the NHD report, this is a little bit on the high side. Most NHDs are about $99 or less. But for estimating purposes, this is the figure that I'll always use on here. All right, guys. The final thing I'd want to leave you with, any questions on the seller estimate? Okay, I will leave you with this lovely note. It is tax time again. First half property taxes are out. They are due October 1st and delinquent December 10th. Everybody gets a little confused with the tax periods and how they work. We work off a fiscal year here in San Diego County and most counties in California. So this tax bill that's due October 1st and delinquent December 10th covers the period from July 1st of 2023 through and including December 31st of 2023. Okay, so we will now be required to pay first half taxes. We pay that out of seller's proceeds, and then we prorate accordingly and give the seller back a credit from the buyer from July 1st through and including our close of escrow date. But these taxes will have to be paid. Now, I get a lot of people that try and rush out and mail in a check to the county tax recorder. I'm telling you right now, the county tax collector gets swamped during this time of year, and they are very, very slow at posting payments paid. So if you have a seller that says, I paid those taxes, I mailed out my check a week ago, but by the time we close, it still has not posted on the county tax collector's site, please let them know that I am going to have to hold those taxes until they post paid. If they do not post paid on the county site, by the time we close escrow, title will require me to hold the taxes. So if you have a seller that's rushing out to pay it, but they're anticipating closing escrow before November 15th, say, you know what, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, hold off. Escrow is going to pay those through escrow for you. And that way you don't have to do it. And that way you can ensure that they're paid, because if they're not posted on the county site, escrow is going to have to hold those funds until they post. Now, where it gets really tricky is for people that have an established impound account with their mortgage company. Mortgage companies wait until the very last minute to pay the taxes. So if your seller has an impound account and we're closing escrow before December 10th, and they have not posted on the county website that the taxes have paid yet, we will have to pay those through escrow, and the mortgage company will end up paying them as well, unless they're paid off prior to that. But one way or another, the seller will get a refund. either for double payment, they'll get a refund from me once they posted paid, or if the loan is paid off before the mortgage holder pays those taxes, that'll be part of the refund that they get when we close. If you guys have any escrows closing from now through December 10th, before you have your seller run out and pay them, if they don't have an impound account, please reach out to me. Let's work together with your seller and we'll figure out the proper game plan to ensure that they don't make double payments on their taxes. All right, you guys, any other questions about anything pertaining to escrow, any things that you're running into, or any topics that you'd like to see talked about in the future? All right.
Anybody going once, going twice? Oh, Bo's got something.
Yeah, I was just gonna say thanks, Erica. That was good stuff. It's always good to get a refresh.
Yeah, for sure. And if you guys want anything more, just let me know. If you want that 593 form, I'll send it to Keely and have her blast it out to all you guys. Please take that with you to listing appointments. And I'm hoping to see everybody Wednesday, November 8th. It's going to be a lot of fun, and all the details will be out within the next week or so. So thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you very much.
Question, Erica.
Yeah.
Doesn't the seller usually pay the HOA dues while they're in escrow? Because right now I'm getting, just got a text this morning that my buyers are saying that they're supposed to pay the escrow dues for September and they're closing in October and that it's late. But I said, no, that's not usually the case.
No, so escrow's responsibility, unless otherwise negotiated on the purchase contract, escrow and seller's responsibility is that all HOA dues have to be paid current and to date and through the month of closing. So for a deal that's closing in October, if the seller has not paid all the way up through and including the end of October, I charge the seller to get everything current. And then I prorate accordingly from the close of escrow through the end of October and give the seller back a credit for the period that they don't own the home. And then it's always customary that escrow pays a minimum of 1 month on behalf of the buyer. So if your client is closing in October, escrow should be collecting November HOA dues out of the buyer's side to pay to the property management company, because that allows them time to process all the paperwork, get a payment coupon out to the buyer for their December 1 HOA dues. There are very few cases where the management company requires escrow to charge the buyer for the first 2 months. And in that case, we have to pay for 2 months in advance, but at minimum, escrow will pay for 1 month out of the buyer's side so that the management company has time to process all the paperwork and everything. But the seller's responsibility through and including the month of close of escrow is a seller debit.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for clarifying.
Of course.
All right. Well, thanks for everybody being on. And thanks again, Erica. That was great.
All right. You guys have a great day.
All right. You too. Take care.
Thank
Thank you so much, Erica.
You're welcome.